This is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho.
On today's episode, we are looking at the 48th edition of the Toronto International Film Festival, which is about to kick off, running from September 7th to the 17th. The festival will be screening over 200 films this year. It'll look a little differently with the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes going on, limiting how much press will be done, but we are still very excited for the movies that are being shown. Today, Rachel and I are going to be sharing our 5 most anticipated movies that are playing. Before we get started, though, what do you think of the overall lineup of films this year, Rachel?
It's okay. It's not, I think, especially if you compare it to last year's, there's no big showstopper. There's no big, there's no new Spielberg. There's no new, like, even something like Canadian, like there's that Sarah Polley came out last year. It's like, we don't really have something like that this year. And if you contrast it to Venice's program lineup, you kind of understand why TIFF doesn't feel as big or as significant. Now, I say that, and what might end up happening is a ton of films come out of the festival, which are just going to absolutely rock my socks. And I hope that that's what happens. But just kind of looking at it, I'm not overly like excited about it, especially when I looked at Venice, because I was like, oh, Venice actually has a lot of cool stuff this year.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. When I was looking through the lineup, it was one of those things where there was no movie that like, oh, this is my most anticipated movie of the year, like there usually is at TIFF. Instead, it was about like narrowing down to 5 movies was hard because there's about 25 movies where I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of interested in this, but like, I'm not like going to be in the theater day one for it. So it's, I agree with you where there's probably going to be a whole bunch of like surprise great films in here or ones we assume will be good, might even be better than we expected. But yeah, there's nothing that's blowing you away that TIFF normally has that wow factor that definitely sort of seems to be lacking this year.
It's kind of funny because usually when you do these preview episodes, you're like, I can't choose because there are so many great, like, big headlines, or not even big headliners, because I think you and I are actually very good about not just necessarily.
We usually try to avoid those, yeah.
Yeah, like, and so, but this year it's more of, this is okay. This looks good. Like, this looks interesting. I mean, there are a few in my 5 that I am genuinely very excited to watch. But I'd say the majority was like, yeah, I could include that, or I could include that. And so that's kind of what made it harder to decipher, or to pick the 5 rather. But regardless, it's how many years? I think my 2nd year doing TIFF, maybe 3rd. I can't remember. I think 3rd, actually, including like a virtual year. It's still an exciting time, and it's still fun to be able to go down to downtown and like actually enjoy the festival atmosphere. I know you're not going to be able to. Sorry to rub it in your face, but that's your choice, dude. That was it. No one else's choice. But it is fun. Like I sit here and I say, oh, like I wish that, I'm not as enthused about the TIFF lineup, and unenthusiastic TIFF lineup is still a TIFF lineup. So I'm still looking forward to going to the festival.
Yeah, absolutely. And in TIFF related news is very interesting. Just yesterday, it was announced that this is the last year that Bell is sponsoring the festival, and next year they will not have a title sponsor as of the moment going on right now. So that's something to pay attention to see how that sort of plays out. I know we don't usually talk about TIFF behind the scenes or drama sort of stuff, but like maybe next year we'll be going to the TIFF Rogers Light Box to watch movies.
God. That's probably going to be what happens too, isn't it? It's just going to be like a Rogers nonsense. How about it not be a telecom? Let's make it a bank instead.
Oh, right? Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's really, really interesting. That's actually very fascinating. I'm very curious who's going to pick that up. It could be Scotiabank. They've been picking up a lot of stuff around Toronto. Rogers is a very good show, though. It could be Rogers.
Yeah. Who knows?
Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah. Maybe that's something we cover in the end of year news stories, because we'll probably know by then.
I definitely think it's something that needs to kind of be paid attention to a little bit, because
Absolutely.
whether or not we want to admit it, it really affects the film
Yes.
festival because they rely so much on corporate funding to be able to run.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're Canadian, Rogers is one of, like, I mean, they're one of the biggest companies in the country at this point, aren't they?
Yes.
And they are amazingly cheap when it comes to the Toronto Blue Jays at the minimum, is what I'm going to say. So but the thing is with TIFF, like, that's different, is that the whole point is to spend a lot of money to make it look very extravagant and to kind of make it look alongside a Cannes or a Venice. I mean, it used to be kind of considered a bit above Venice, but like, it's meant to be a very extravagant event, where with mixing in the kind of the more laid back culture of Toronto, which I would argue Toronto is not as laid back as it was when the festival first started. I think it is getting a bit hoity-toity around these parts, but I'm very curious to see who picks that up. That'll be interesting for movie industry wise, but also just kind of on a Canadian business level. Like, that'll be very interesting to see who takes it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into our movies. I organize mine alphabetically. I don't really have a list of most to least anticipated. And I would say, looking at my list, the thing that all kind of connects them all is more the director exciting me than the actual film, subject matter, stars, stuff like that. How did you go about making your list?
I'd say the same thing. However, I would argue, don't you think you and I, that's typically how we go about picking? Like, I feel like you and I get more excited when we see like a certain director, or to a lesser extent a certain actor. But like, if we know that, like Alex Garland's got like a new script, he's got a new script out there, we'd be like, oh shit, we need to go watch that. Versus, oh, there's this movie that is about, like, we could hear a movie and be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But I feel like those types of movies where you hear the plot and you think, oh, that sounds like an interesting one, that comes like in the middle of the festival when you hear people talking about it and you go, oh, that does sound really interesting, and I kind of want to go check that out. But on first glance, for me, the easiest way is to just look at who are the directors, who's coming out, maybe a director who hasn't been working for a little while, or a particular actor that you're just fond of and you want to be like, oh, I just want to watch them. And I have one documentary in mind, and I suppose in that sense then that the documentary is something I was like, I'm interested in the content. Oh, no, because it's the person. We'll get to it. When we get to it, we'll get to it.
Okay. Well then, Rachel, why don't you start us off? What is the first movie on your list?
Sure. So I was saying, directors who haven't been around for a little while. My very first pick is a movie called The Boy and the Heron, which is a Miyazaki movie and meant to be his last one, I believe. For now. I don't really. The last one was his last one. Exactly. I don't believe directors anymore when they say that they're done. I just don't believe it. But at the same time, not complaining. I am not complaining in the slightest. I think Miyazaki is one of the amazing filmmakers, amazing artists of our time, and we're very lucky to live in a time where we see his movies come out and we can watch them incredibly accessible now today. Than it's like when I was little, I remember we had bootlegs of them, and because they were just kind of tough to find, you couldn't really. I don't know if you could go to Jumbo Video and find them. Probably not. Not really, because back then I don't know if there was as much interest in Japanese animation as there is today. So today I know Netflix has a whole stable of his films, and so yeah, he's got a new one out, and this one is focused again within the Second World War. And anyone who has seen Spirited Away, Grave of the Fireflies, you know that it's probably going to be a bit of a heavy watch when it comes to Miyazaki and the Second World War, as it should be. And initially he was going to base it off of a novel called How Do You Live? And that's obviously a Japanese or an English translation of a Japanese title. And the story, to my understanding, is that he was initially going to just adapt the book into an animated film, but then it ended up being kind of more inspired by that book, and he's taken it to a whole new level. So I'm incredibly excited to watch it. I'm just a really big fan of his work, and I don't think I've ever seen one of his movies in a movie theater. now that
Oh.
I think about it. I don't think I've ever seen one in a movie theater. So I'm really excited for that experience, generally speaking. And I don't know if he's coming to Toronto. That'd be kind of fun if he was.
Yeah, it's so interesting with this movie because they're basically, I think a lot of us online film fans have often just wished, be like, hey, I would love it if you just told us what the movie is and, just sort of release it. Like, we'll be there. We love these people. And Miyazaki's kind of done that where he's like, I'm giving you the poster. That's all you're getting.
Yeah.
And
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love him because he's kind of like Nolan. I don't need to know anymore.
That's the thing. And like, I don't know if it was him or the company sort of relented a little bit because some still images did come out, 4 images, and a very, very, very bare bones plot outline has been released, but there's still so far no trailer, nothing else like that. So, and everyone's raving about that, has seen it because it has screened at another festival already, I believe. Mm-hmm. I can't remember where else.
I believe in Japan it's already come out. Or not come out, but like you said, it's screened.
It's screened there, yeah. So I think, once again, people are going to be excited. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, you're either going to see a Miyazaki movie or you're not. A trailer's not going to convince you to go see a Miyazaki movie.
This is not the platform to do this, but I'm not into watching trailers, really. I don't mind if I go to the movies and then I see a trailer there, but I've never been one that like tracks them down online to see, because number one, I feel like a lot of trailers give a lot away today, and they give the best parts of a movie away. So then by the time you actually go sit down, you're like, I've already seen all of this. Mission Impossible being a very good example of that. Like, why would you show your biggest stunt in the whole entire marketing was based off of that. But so anyways, I respect somebody like Miyazaki who says, no, I'm not doing that. You just come to my movie, come to my movie and watch it, or don't. And what does he care really at this stage in his career? And I'm very, very excited to watch this. And this is one of those that I don't normally try and be like, I really want to get in on the opening night. Like, I really want the ticket. But this is one of those. I'm like, it would be just really cool to watch this at Roy Thompson.
Nice.
In the premiere.
Well, my first movie is also a Japanese film, and that is Evil Does Not Exist from Raisuke Hamaguchi, who we last saw with Drive My Car a couple years ago, where it won Best International Feature at the Oscars. I've got some plot synopsis here, so I'll read them out. Because I feel like for the most part, these movies aren't really well known by people. But this one is: Takumi and her 8-year-old daughter, Hana, reside in a forested region of Japan that remain largely unsullied by large-scale development. Until now, a pair of agents come to Takumi's village to propose a glamping project, a resort for vacationers who want to feel like they're camping without getting their fingernails dirty. During the briefing, locals critique numerous flaws in the project, from fire hazards to inadequate septic tanks, but the blank responses from the agents make it clear this exercise is purely tokenistic. The agency is determined to move forward regardless of whether locals approve. Now, I read all that, sounds very interesting, but, Rachel, would you say you were interested when I said Hamaguchi had a new movie?
Yes.
Exactly.
Solely based off. I was talking to my cousin's husband said to me recently, he goes, I finally watched Drive My Car. It was one of those that he knew he's a big film buff. So he's like, I knew I should watch it, but it was just the length of it was quite daunting to him, which I do understand that. But then he sat down, he was in the mood for it, and he watched it and he absolutely loved it. And then I was like, well, guess what? He's got a new movie at TIFF. So, and he was really excited by that because he was like, oh, that's interesting. So I can like watch another one of his films, because he was saying to me, what else by him would you recommend, kind of thing. So I'm really excited, and I think it feels like Drive My Car was just last year, but I realize it was not.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, it didn't matter what the movie was going to be about. Tell me Hamaguchi's movie's out, and I'm there. I'm right there.
Yeah, it's probably going to be 3 hours long. It's probably going to be slow as shit, but it's going to be the most exciting thing you'll see all year.
I don't know about exciting, but I think it'll be like, it's just one of those, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it just hits you in this way that it's kind of stirring almost. Like, it just sits with you, and I really wouldn't call it exciting. Like, it's not an exciting film that you're like, holy shit, he's jumping off a cliff.
Hamaguchi is a low simmer.
Yeah, very low simmer, but it's great though. It's great.
What do you have next?
My next movie is called The Critic. And it is, so the reason that I was pulled to this was the cast, actually. So Ian McKellen and Mark Strong, the two of them are playing, well, Mark Strong is playing the kind of the owner of a family paper. And Ian McKellen, sorry, I forgot his name there. Ian McKellen, he plays a theater critic. And they're trying to cut costs in the paper. This movie is set in 1936, but it's still like a very real issue today. Probably more real than it. Well, actually, no, 1936. It was pretty real back then too. Mm-hmm. But they're looking to fire Ian McKellen and his character Jimmy, who is a openly gay critic. And despite kind of the rampant homophobia at the time, he is still writing in a way that is true to himself, even if other people see it and think, what is going on here? Like, this is indecent, inappropriate for our society, so on and so forth. Gemma Arterton, thank you. She's in it as well, and she's playing an actress who is typically the target of Jimmy in his reviews, and quite scathing. And so the two of them, Mark Strong's character and Gemma Arterton, I don't know why I'm really struggling with that name. Gemma's character. The two of them are basically looking to gun down Jimmy and take him out. And Jimmy says, I'm going to entrap the two of them. So it's kind of an interesting thriller, yet drama. And I find it really, it's one, it's got the period thing. Like, you'd love that. It's nice, like a different time period. But two, I just think the cast is amazing. I don't think I've ever seen Mark Strong and Ian McKellen together in a film, and to have them go head to head with one another, I think is just going to be absolutely phenomenal. So I'm really, really looking forward to this one.
Who's the director of that one again?
The director is Anand Tucker, who I'm not too familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it either, but this was one that had crossed my radar as well, and it sounds super interesting. Obviously, anytime you get McKellen in something, you know it's going to be good. Yeah. And Mark Strong is a really good character actor as well, so it's nice to see him pop up in a leading role.
Gemma as well, whose last name I cannot pronounce today, but she's great as well. Yes. I really do like her as an actress.
Yes. Yeah, that should be a fun one for sure. My next one is a movie called Hitman, which was directed by Richard Linklater. Gary Johnson is a philosophy professor by day, lecturing his students on theories of morality. In his downtime, he works with the police in surveillance vans as a tech-savvy staff investigator during undercover sting operations. When the temperamental officer who normally plays the role of hitman is placed on leave for misconduct, milquetoast Gary is asked to step in because he vaguely resembles the ousted officer. To everyone's surprise, Gary thrives impersonating the fabricated killers. So, Linklater is... I love him. He's one of my favorite directors, but he certainly can be a little hit or miss. You look at his filmography, and for every 10 out of 10 masterpiece, he's got like a 4 out of 10 completely forgettable movie, and you're always like, wow, how does he keep pulling it off of these such highs and lows? And his track record with comedy, once again, has some really highs and lows with movies like Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some, and he reunites with his Everybody Wants Some star Glenn Powell as this lead philosophy professor / now secret undercover cop. But so I'm really excited because I do love Linklater, and I do think Glenn Powell's a really interesting actor. I think he's really funny when he's given the comedy roles. So I'm definitely curious about this. Who knows? This might be a complete miss, but I'm still excited for it regardless.
Linklater was always a director that I'm like, he's all right. Like, he's okay. But then I stop and I really think the movies that he's done that I love them. Like, they are some of the top films in my list. Like, Apollo 10.5 is still a movie. Like, I throw that on every now and then because I just love it so much. And was it Scanner Darkly? And of course, like the
Before movies. And
thank you.
Like
yeah, those ones. I mean,
Boyhood.
Those are very in a separate category all to themselves. But he's like a director that I kind of forget about sometimes. I'm always like, oh yeah, like I like him, but like you said, a lot of highs and a lot of lows though too. So I'm curious about it. I think I am going to watch that one. I am going to try to check that one out because, the last thing he did was Apollo. Is the last thing he did 10.5? I think it is.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that movie, and I am willing to sit through another one of his films, even if it ends up not being great. I think it'll be interesting. And I'm a Glenn Powell fan as well. I think that he's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. What is your next film?
My next one is one that I believe is also on your list, which is Dumb Money.
I've removed it from my list to include something else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, you said you're going in alphabetical order. I'm like, did I miss something? Because maybe I wasn't listening, and that's a shock horror for people that I wasn't listening.
Yo, what up, everybody? Roaring Kitty here. I'm gonna pick a stock and talk about why I think it's interesting, and that stock is GameStop.
I love this guy.
Retail traders have hooked into GameStop.
I think they think it's a good investment. It looks like there's one guy driving all the buying.
Who is this schmuck?
Dumb money, man.
Happy to take it.
Wall Street is betting that this company is going to fail. But if it fails, these hedge fund assholes make a shit ton of money. 70,000 people have watched this video.
Roaring Kitty, I love you!
So, Dumb Money. It is directed by Craig Gillespie, who people remember from I, Tonya, and he did another big movie that I can't think of right now. But I, Tonya, for me, gives him a lot of great leeway because I love that movie. Dumb Money is about the GameStop madness that happened, 2 years ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's going behind the scenes, so kind of in a Big Short type of way, but also looking at the craze that it caused online as well. We've had a lot of movies now about stuff. Like this year has been a lot of movies about stuff. So you have Air, Tetris, Flamin' Cheetos, Beanie Babies. What else? I'm missing something. Oh, Blackberry. Yeah, there's one. And this is kind of in the similar vein. And I have to admit, I'm getting really sick of this, whatever genre this is. But this one looks really interesting to me. It's got a really cool cast. It's got Paul Dano, Seth Rogen is in it. And I think it's just going to be, I'm not expecting big things from it. It is one of the bigger movies I think that's coming out at TIFF this year. But just the cast alone and the director, I really do like Craig Gillespie. I think that I really like the tone that he has in his movies and the way that he goes about telling. I, Tonya was based off of obviously true events. So I'm curious to see how he takes what happened with GameStop as well. I don't know though, and you can weigh in on this. Is it too soon to be talking about GameStop? Because that was so recent. Because everything else that I mentioned of all those movies, those all happened in the 90s, the early 2000s. GameStop literally was just not that. When I got an email about this movie earlier this spring, and this was before kind of an announcement was made, I didn't realize that a movie about GameStop was happening. And I emailed the rep back being like, that was really quick. They came out with this thing really fast. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I just think it's really fast for a movie to be coming out about this.
Yeah, I agree on that aspect. I really hate this trend of doing, biopics or movies based on true stories that come out a year after the event had happened. And I'm just we don't usually at this time, we don't even know what the full scope and the ramifications of stories like this are. And it sometimes takes years and years and years to be able to properly look back and be like, oh, this is indicative of what was happening at the time. So
Blackberry being a great example of that. Blackberry.
Exactly. Yeah. If they had made, the Blackberry movie at the height or right at the start of their downfall or whatever it is, it would have totally changed how you perceive it. So I agree with you in that sense. I am very excited for this. I would say, we were talking at the start about, big name movies and there seems to be a lack of it. I would say Dumb Money and Next Goal Wins are probably the two really big name movies for me that are playing that I'm very excited about. I remember when this happened, I just could not understand what they were doing. So it's nice that hopefully in the vein of the Big Short or something like that, it sort of helps explain the situation of what was going on to lay people.
Fair. That actually, you know what? That's a good point. Because I think Big Short did a good job of explaining it to Like my dad, he teaches accounting in college here in Toronto, and he uses Big Short a lot for examples to how to like explain certain things like shorting stocks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people in his class are not exchange students. What's the word am I looking for? International students. And so it's very, very helpful because those things can be quite dense. Like the stock market stuff can be quite dense to understand. So I never thought of it that way, actually. That's good. But I to your earlier point, like this is on my list and this is something I am very much so looking forward to. But I feel like the significance of that what happened with GameStop, we just don't really know it yet. Like in 5 years' time, we might have all forgotten about it because it really had no significance whatsoever on us at all, other than just being this kind of funny blip in the system that happened. But who knows? Like we don't know. And then maybe that is the beauty of having some time in between games, like an event happening and then a movie coming out about it. But
it's also funny whenever we get a movie based on something that happens on the internet. I'm always like, really? We're going with the internet thing? All right, cool. Yeah. All right, we'll see how it works out.
I think one thing I'll say, they've gotten better about how to portray internet stuff in movies, because at the beginning, and understandably so, it was really corny and just not great. Like it just looked really, really cheesy on the screen. But now I think they've kind of gotten in a better way, because how do you make like people texting each other interesting, right? Like this will be a lot of Zola is actually a really good example of that, of like it was just a series of tweets. Like how do you translate that into it? And they kind of found a very clever way of incorporating the Twitter origins of it onto the movie. And so I'm curious to see how Dumb Money does. It'll be an interesting film, and hopefully good. I'm hoping it's good, because I love Paul Dano and I like Seth Rogen a lot too. So I hope it's good.
Mm-hmm. All right. My next one is a movie called Poolman, which was directed by Chris Pine. Every morning, Darren inspects and cleans the pool of his low-rise apartment block, a Zen ritual he performs with exacting precision, partly because it's the one thing he can do, actually nurture in his beloved city. And he looks up to Aaron Brockovich's example of social justice, writing daily letters to her about his failing fight for a better bus schedule. But after an embarrassing scuffle at a city council meeting, he hits rock bottom until a femme fatale named June Del Rey shows up at his pool step with an intriguing piece of information. Darren sees it as an opportunity to save Los Angeles. To get to the bottom of the case, he ropes in his idiosyncratic friends, his Pilates instructor girlfriend Susan, his therapist Diane, and her husband Jack, a washed-up director who's shooting a documentary on what might actually prove to be a dangerous conspiracy. So this sounds right up my alley in terms of a neo-noir, shaggy dog conspiracy crime movie, which I absolutely love. The description of it is giving me shades of like Under the Silver Lake as well. And there's been a picture release of Chris Pine where he's got this ridiculous long gray hair and big shaggy gray beard. And he's like ripped, but he's got like these headphones on and these ridiculous sunglasses. And I see that image. I'm like, I'm sold. You don't need to tell me anymore. I'm there for this movie. And the fact that it's going to be Chris Pine's directorial debut also has me very excited. And it's got a pretty interesting cast as well. Annette Bening and Danny DeVito are also in it, and there's some other people as well. Is this one that crossed your radar?
Yes, I'm a big. What are his fans called? Pine cone.
Piners? Do you pine for him?
Oh God! But I really, really like Chris Pine. He's somebody who, I don't know what my first movie that I saw him in. Maybe actually it might have been Star Trek. That was kind of the first time I really took notice of him. But I've watched a lot of his interviews and I've read a lot of his interviews as well. And I find the thing that makes me really interested about him directing is that sometimes you read interviews with certain people and actors in particular, and you can kind of hear they would be a good director. Like you can kind of understand, because the way that they speak about the filmmaking process is in a very particular way. It's not in the typical actor way. They actually speak about it in a sense that, like, kind of in the way that everyone, not everybody, but like, it was very clear Ben Affleck was always going to be a director. And I would argue he is probably a better director than he is an actor. So and I'm trying to think of another example. Bill Hader, actually, he's a great example of that. He is someone that, like, anytime I've heard an interview with him, he is clearly a director. And Chris Pine always struck me as that as well, like just somebody who had such a good grasp. And that probably comes from, he is from a Hollywood family. Like his father was a very successful actor himself. So maybe it comes from that, like just growing up around it and having a bit of a ingrained eye for it, I suppose. But the cast looks cool. I've heard Danny DeVito talk about it a little bit on this Always Sunny podcast. So which I didn't realize he was going to be in it. And anything Danny DeVito is in, I find very amusing because I think his choices are very funny at this stage in his career. He's just doing things that seem to amuse him. So I'm all game. But yeah, I'm into it. I love Chris Pine. I am a Piner. Is that what you wanted to call us? Yeah, sure. And but no, I'm game for anything he does, and particularly seeing him in the director's chair. I find really fascinating.
Nice. Yeah. All right. What is your next movie?
My next movie is actually in a very similar vein, which is it's another actor who is also directing in this one, but it's not his debut. It is a movie called Knox Go Away. Knox as in Knox. And it is Michael Keaton directing, and he's also playing the character of Knox in the film as well. And Knox is a contract killer who realizes that he needs to retire because he's just getting a little bit too old for the job. And he is pretty set on doing this until his son shows up at his door one day covered in blood and needs his father's help to cover up a violent crime. That alone, I feel like, is a wonderful premise. Tack on the fact that Michael Keaton is playing Knox and his son is James Marsden. I'm very sold on that because I think James Marsden is one of the most underrated actors that we have right now. If you've seen Jury Duty, he's great in it. He's a fantastic actor. I really, really enjoy him. I think he's great in comedy. And Al Pacino is also in this movie, kind of randomly in my opinion, but I'm a big fan of all three of those men, and I think the concept sounds interesting. Anytime that there is a film about contract killers, but in a kind of a comedic way, and this sounds a little bit comedic to me, I'm really game for it because I think it's funny when you see serial killers being silly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one that I'm intrigued by, but I'm definitely going to wait for other people to watch it first. I find the trio of Michael Keaton, James Marsden, and Al Pacino, I like them all, but I also find that they have a lot of misses as well, and I'm not always on board with them.
Even with Marsden?
Marsden, I don't think I've seen enough to really say. I think he's okay.
Did you see Disturbing Behavior?
I have not, no.
Katie Holmes.
So it is one of those movies that I'm unsure about. It sounds interesting, and I didn't know that Michael Keaton actually directed a movie before. I just looked that up, and it's news to me. So it's one I'm going to keep an eye on, but not one I'm excited about at the moment.
Fair enough. I mean, who wouldn't want to see Batman direct something? But that's, each to their own.
We were just talking about Ben Affleck. Why can't I watch his movies?
You can watch Air. Did you see?
Loved it.
Seen it? I haven't watched Air yet, actually.
Oh, it's really good.
Is it? I've heard very mixed things about it, so I don't know.
It's pretty good. I think you'd like it.
I like Matt Damon too, so I'll watch it. But yeah. Anyways,
my next movie, we're going to keep this trend going of actors directing movies, but we're going back to directorial debuts, and that is Woman of the Hour, which is from Anna Kendrick. In the 1970s, Rodney Alcala went on a murder spree, luring women by posing as a photographer looking for models. Though already a registered sex offender and recently released from prison, he infamously appeared on The Dating Game, a show that introduced a set of 3 new bachelors each week, hidden from view as a woman asked them amusing questions before choosing a winner to go on an all-expensive paid trip with her. That sounds utterly terrifying. But it looks like Anna Kendrick is sort of infusing it with a bit of humor as well. And from what I understand, she really just sort of wants to explore the idea of why would someone who is in the middle of being a serial killer decide to do something so public and have his name out there. And so that's very interesting. And it sort of seems like it's a more of a slice of life biopic, which I appreciate so much more than we're going to look at them from birth to death and everything in between and just, fast forward through all the interesting stuff. Here it's like we're going to look at one specific moment in time. Why did this person do this? What was their motivation? Why were they feeling this way? All that sort of stuff. It just seems absolutely interesting. And Anna Kendrick is in it as well. She is the young woman who is picking between the eligible bachelors.
So this is one, it's kind of funny how we've been saying we typically look to like the actor, the director, who's behind it. That's what pulls us into the project more than the plot itself. This was one where I was like, oh yeah, Anna Kendrick's directing. I said, okay, I like Anna Kendrick. I'm nothing against Anna Kendrick whatsoever. But
Jeff
I wasn't
going to be so mad at you if you say something bad.
And she's great. And she seems to have a real soft spot for Toronto in a way. Like I've noticed I don't know why I really link her in with a Toronto girl. She's not from here, obviously, but anyways, I wasn't completely sold on this being something that I want to watch or anything like that. I thought I'll catch it later, maybe not at TIFF. I'll wait for it to come out in theaters or something. Then I quickly read the synopsis and I was like, this sounds fascinating. Again, I'm all about serial killers. Give me a serial killer movie and I'm into it. And this sounds actually really interesting. So I'm excited for this one. And it is on my list of movies that I am going to watch and most likely review as well, I believe.
Oh, nice. Well, you'll be able to find Jeff Ballmer, host of Classic Movies Live, probably first in line for this movie.
Just camping out, waiting for this one. Watching it every single viewing that they have. He's going to go in for
it. Yes. All right. What is your last movie you want to preview?
You asked me about the nature of our relationship.
I needed to know who I was talking to. Were you my friend across the fire? Who are you?
And if I can't answer that question?
It's terribly difficult to recruit for a secret service. You're looking for somebody who's a bit bad, but at the same time loyal. There's a type, and I fitted perfectly.
So the last one is called The Pigeon Tunnel, and this is the documentary. It is based off of the memoirs of John Le Carré.
Oh, I did not know about this movie.
Yes, it's based off his memoir, and he passed away in 2020, I believe, or was it 2019? He passed away not very long ago. Is basically what I'm trying to say. It was just a few years ago he passed away, but he had written his memoirs ahead of time, and was very, very warmly received. I am a big spy junkie. Like I love reading spy novels, and he is obviously the guy. He is the guy that you look to when you think about that genre in as an author. And so this documentary, I believe, it has interviews with him. That I think that they kind of got it all together before he passed away, obviously. And it just goes over his career, and it's effectively his memoirs, but brought into a documentary setting. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a incredible documentary, and I'm very excited for it. And I believe, I sound like I work for Apple, but I believe it's coming out on Apple TV Plus at the end of October. I don't know the exact date, but point is, you won't have to wait very long. If you don't catch it at TIFF, you don't have to wait very long to watch it.
It's funny. TIFF has this like trend of movies that like will appear at the festival, and then like the next week they're released.
That was The Woman King last year. Like it had its theatrical debut in the middle of the film festival, and it was kind of like, well, what's the point of paying however much more a ticket at Princess of Wales Theatre than just going to like my local Cineplex? I don't know, but I just find it silly. Like, and actually, we talked about what was Taika's movie called again?
Next Goal Wins.
Next Goal Wins. That's coming out at the beginning of November. Dumb Money comes out to September. Actually, a number of TIFF movies are coming out September 22nd. So I think Dumb Money does, and then Flora and Son, which has, I think, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's in that one. Those are all debuting on the 22nd. So it used to be like film festivals like TIFF is where a lot of films got their distribution, like even bigger films. But it seems to be now just to be, here's the debut of it, and it's going on. But anyways, Pigeon Tunnel. I'm very much so looking forward to it. I think it'll be very interesting to see, and I'm very excited to watch it.
I'm now very excited about it.
Yeah.
If people aren't familiar with Le Carré, he wrote the novels that based on Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, The Constant Gardener, A Most Wanted Man, The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. He's considered the preeminent spy thriller writer of all time.
Basically, all the good, like really intriguing British spy stuff that's not James Bond is from him. Like he is definitely certainly like the godfather of the genre, I would say. I really enjoy his work.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your last film?
My last one is called Zone of Interest, which is from Jonathan Glazer. So towards the final days of the Holocaust, Hedwig is fixated on self-preservation, while Rudolph is increasingly burdened by his duties. We reside inside the family's encampment with background voices of ghost-like prisoners muffled by the perpetrator's quotient musings. At one point, Hedwig and her atrocious friends joke about their new luxury goods received from Canada, the nickname of the storage facilities where such items, after being confiscated, were stored at the demise of their former neighbors. Now, this sounds like an absolutely brutally tough movie to get through, but the reason why it's on my list is Jonathan Glazer has not made a movie since Under the Skin, and it is about damn time that he returns to filmmaking. It's funny, we were just talking on our last episode about Under the Skin with Jericho on it, and I wanted to mention, I was like, yeah, and he hasn't made a movie since. This is his comeback, and it's, I believe, almost completely in German, which is definitely interesting, and it's already played at some other festivals, and it's getting absolutely rave reviews, and if it qualifies for international film based on the language content, it looks to be the front runner this year at the Oscars.
It was also filmed in Auschwitz, which is one aspect of the film I find interesting. Like at first when I heard that, I kind of grimaced a little bit. I was just like, it seems a bit, I don't want to say disrespectful.
Tacky, inappropriate, disrespectful.
Tacky is actually probably a good word for it. Just this idea of it being like, you know, we know what happened there, and I visited Auschwitz a number of years ago now, but the very first thing that they say to you when you're there is like, this is a cemetery. Like, this is a cemetery above all else. Like, we know we're taking tour groups around here, and you're seeing there's displays and museums and all that kind of stuff around. But at the end of the day, what you have to remember is that this is a cemetery for, you know, a ridiculous amount of people, right?
Yeah.
And so when I heard they're actually filming a movie there, I was like, well, it's not a comedy. It's not like a silly, you know what I mean? Like, they're not using the play, like they're using the scene and the setting for what actually happened there. So I do understand that. But yeah, at first I was a little bit like, it seems a bit much. Like it's very unnecessary as well. There's no reason to film there. You can film in many other places. But then, I don't know, I've kind of come around to it the more I think about it. And every time the movie comes up, the title comes up, I think about it a little bit more. And I think it is just telling a story of what happened there. And especially in today's very strange discourse, there are people who don't believe it happened. And so it's kind of, it's okay. I mean, I can't speak for it, to be honest. I mean, I'm not in any position to say whether it's okay or not, but it seems to me like if it takes having to actually film in this place so that people can actually believe what happened there, then maybe that's helpful. I don't know, but I am interested to see it though. I think that sounds really fascinating. I like Jonathan Glazer as well. But yeah, that bit, I'm still a bit, I suppose I'm a little bit like seesaw about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's absolutely fair. It is going to be really tough subject matter to sit through, mm-hmm. and not one that's going to be a fun movie to enjoy. I think it's going to really sort of dig deep at the evil of humanity and what people are able to, unfortunately, successfully do when they put their minds to it. And it's going to be a really tough watch, but because Glazer is behind it and someone who I really respect, I have high hopes that it's been handled with the tact and dignity that a story like this needs to have to be told.
And it sounds like that is the case. I feel like it has screened, as you said, in a number of places already. And if it wasn't handled in a respectful manner, if it wasn't done in a way that isn't tacky, that isn't appropriate, I feel like we would have heard about it by now, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people would have been up in arms about it. Because I'm sure that this movie had a target on its back just simply because of where they filmed it and the subject matter of it. So the fact that I haven't really heard too much about people calling it out and saying this and that about it makes me pretty optimistic that I think that it was a movie done in tribute to what happened there in a very kind of solemn and respectful manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was just a handful of movies that we are excited about.
What a downer movie to end on.
Yeah, sorry about that. Maybe I should have done it in alphabetical order. But there is plenty of more of exciting stuff to check out. Rachel, I know you're going to have boots on the ground there checking stuff out, and you're going to be doing coverage for a whole bunch of different publications, I imagine. I'm working to get some screeners and doing reviews and hoping to get some other people involved doing some reviews. I don't want to share too much yet about what all of our plans are, but yeah, there'll be lots of TIFF coverage from you, right, Rachel?
Yes, it'll be on Exclaim, of course. I'm going to be doing a few things on POV magazine. I actually interviewed a director for a short film that I cannot recommend enough. And I know a lot of people skip over the short films, but there is one called Aphasia, which is a neurodegenerative disorder that is very common in Alzheimer's patients, and if you've had a stroke or anything that can affect the nervous system, basically, aphasia is a pretty common disorder to come with it. And it's just this like under 4-minute clip, and I got to speak with the director of it, and she's an artist in Montreal, and I had an amazing time talking to her and Marielle Dalpé. I'm pretty sure I butchered her last name there, but I would recommend that if you're looking for TIFF stuff as well. Actually, that is if whatever short program that's a part of, I would really recommend it. So, anyways, Exclaim, POV, and then of course the Asian Cut. I'm going to be having coverage in those 3 spots.
Nice.
Oh, and here as fantastic. Well, obviously.
Yes, yeah, we will, of course. Obviously, we will be doing a wrap-up podcast as well, and we're working on trying to secure some interviews and hopefully do an interview episode as well, which is always really fun to do during TIFF. So there's going to be lots of great TIFF content on contrazoompod, so make sure you are bookmarking contrazoompod.com to be able to see that. Yeah, Rachel, where can people find you? You kind of mentioned some stuff you were working on, but if people want to find this work, where would they find it?
You can go to rachelho.com, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter at _RachelKH.
Fantastic. This has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at contrazoompod. What films playing at TIFF are you most excited for? Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.